Enjoy more of the things you love with TCL. Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Reckless speculation.
Reckless speculation.
And welcome in to Purple Daily. Phil Mackey, Judd Zulgad, Declan Goff, our executive, that's right, executive producer on the show. And we're going to bring our friend Courtney Cronin in from ESPN.com for a Vikings free agency preview. Dominoes are already falling. They've already cleared some cap space. Riley Reiff, we've discussed that in depth all week. What else could they be doing? How are they going to fix this offensive line? How does Kirk Cousins' contract factor into all of this? We'll get to all of those topics and more after we cheers to our friends, Declan, at Corona Hard Seltzer.
Yeah, speaking of dominoes falling, I'm just going to get all 4 cans starting off here in a couple hours. I'm just going to start knocking them all down. You know, there's one domino falling with Riley Reiff. Is Anthony Barr next? Is Kirk Cousins next? Is a trade coming? There's plenty of dominoes to fall with my Corona Hard Seltzers, and I'm excited to cheers once some big news happens, because this month and every month throughout the year, discover Corona Hard Seltzer, the only hard seltzer made with Pure Beach Vibes, with a refreshing splash of fruit flavors such as tropical lime, mango cherry, and blackberry lime. Corona Hard Seltzer is a tasty spiked sparkling water with a splash of natural fruit flavor that allows you to enjoy the moment. In each can, Corona Hard Seltzer has 0 carbs, 0 sugar, 90 calories, and is gluten-free. Relax responsibly. Corona Hard Seltzer, spiked sparkling water with natural flavors, imported by Crown Imports, Chicago, Illinois.
And also, real quick here, we're in a very giving mood in the month of March at Score North. It's Pick Your Prize month through March 26th. And so every day between March 8th and March 26th, one person who opens the Score North app will win $100. And that's coming, like, Judd's giving you cash. It's just Judd's. It's Judd's
money. Win Judd's money.
Yep.
I just knock on your door and give you $100 and leave.
Just shows up. He wears a mask, so it's not super weird, but it's kind of weird because it's Judd.
Like a pizza or something. Great beer.
And so today's winner is Jamie, I believe it's pronounced Keeker, from Fairmont, Minnesota. So he wins $100 and is entered to win a $10,000 prize pack from one of our 9 partners. You can do it very easily. Open the Score North app. It's free to download, register, and enter the Pick Your Prize contest through listener rewards. Courtney, how are you in the days leading up to the official tampering period? Are you well rested?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I keep thinking about, like, this time last year and where the NFL was, and that there was no signs of them slowing down as the rest of the sports world was coming to a halt, and just thinking about how they forced the CBA through on that final Sunday before free agency, how they extended the tag deadline. And then all of the signings that we saw last year during week where we're like, well, we don't know how this is going to work with the salary cap eventually. And now, obviously, this week we find a year later, the salary cap's at 8% lower than it was in previous years. So some finagling they're going to have to do. Teams are going to have to get creative. And, you know, if you're a team like the Minnesota Vikings, where you don't have a ton of financial flexibility to be, like, super active in free agency, you're going to have to get creative to either create more space to go after free agents that you want, or really think that you're going to hit on certain guys in the draft and potentially get creative with your trading strategy to try to get better, higher draft capital.
So let's start there with the moves that they have made in the past week now to try and free up cap space. I'm going to start you with this one. Have the Vikings put themselves in a better or worse position in your mind by taking a left tackle in Riley Reiff, who was coming off a pretty good year, like he played well, and basically creating an opening at a position? So now, instead of the whole focus being, Courtney, on who's the left guard going to be, it's basically who's the left side of the line going to be.
No, they were in a tough spot. And I think a lot of that has to do with just, you know, that they hedged their bets on Yannick Ngakoue and getting Riley Reiff to take that pay cut last year, which he was very clearly not happy about. It's a $5 million pay cut. You could not go to him again with the restructure and say, take another pay cut after you played really well. I mean, they just gave him that $1 million bonus so he could recoup some of the earnings he would have earned had he been able to play week 17 if he didn't have COVID. But there was really no way, I think, that they were going to be able to, A, get him to take a pay cut, or B, you know, extend him to the point where they're getting a discount and able to lower that cap number so substantially, more than it would have been had they just released him. Because when you saw this week, you know, there's two Carolina franchise, their tackle, Jacksonville franchise their tackle. That's a $14-ish million fully guaranteed salary for 2021. If you're Riley Reif, you're like, I'm 32 years old. I'm just coming off probably my best season with the Vikings, maybe my best season as a pro, certainly best season as a left tackle. I'm going to go try to hit the open market and see what I can make. Someone's going to overpay for me. Now, he could be hedging his bets and end up with what he could have earned in Minnesota on an extension, or could have been potentially less. But that's at least the rationale, I think, for the Vikings, that they really, they were kind of fighting a losing battle here, given the circumstances with Reif before. And I've said this, the relationship between the front office and the team and Riley Reif, let's not, of course they wanted to keep him. I think that if you're, on the coaching side, the personnel side, realizing how big of a void it is when you don't have a good left tackle, that's all the reason to want to keep him. But, in April of last year, they were trying to trade him because they wanted to go after Trent Williams, and they make him take a pay cut later they drafted Ezra Cleveland, and then they make him take a pay cut at the end of the preseason. I don't know how good of a standing the Vikings were with Riley Reif in his camp at the end of the day of wanting to work out something for him to stay there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So now that chip is off the table, I feel like there's 2 or 3 places that they have to sort of figure out where are we entering here? Are we entering looking for a left tackle, or is Ezra Cleveland the left tackle? And now we're going strictly for interior offensive linemen. And then how much more money can they clear? Are they in the Joe Thuney sweepstakes, or are they more in the B and C tier left guard or right guard sweepstakes? So as you survey what's left after Riley Reif from a cap standpoint and from just a positional standpoint, where do you think they should start? And maybe some of it depends on what they think of Ezra Cleveland's position in 2021. Where do you think they should start here?
Pertaining to the offensive line, or just the next step?
Offensive line specifically.
Well, they have to figure out what Ezra Cleveland is. That's the first question. And then you got to figure out, if he is a tackle in the NFL, is he a right tackle or is he a left tackle? Because he played left tackle for 3 seasons at Boise State. I think you drafted him to play left tackle, but you also have Brian O'Neill on the other side of the line who's due for an extension soon. And I'm sure that his representation is probably wondering, well, are we going to get paid at a right tackle number? Or if they're going to move us to left tackle, are we going to go after a left tackle number? Because they could differ substantially, just considering, the importance of left tackles and the potential earnings that O'Neill could have. So it opens up. It's yes, he's the first domino to fall, creating all this cap space. And I know people argue and say, well, Kyle Rudolph did too, but that didn't even get them. They were still in the red after they cut Kyle Rudolph and created $5.1 million in cap savings. And to me, that was kind of the foregone conclusion that was going to happen all offseason. We really didn't know with Riley Reif until this week. So I think that what you have to do is realize you have about 10 million, you're about 10 million-ish under the cap. You can do something here. And like you said, Phil, could they go after Joe Thuney, or are they going after a Gabe Jackson, Kevin Zeitler, the more expensive guard options? Or are you going to be going after, guys who are cap casualties, but you might be able to get on a, significantly reduced deal? Not saying bargain bin Josh Klein, Dakota Dozier style, but going after guys like, James Carpenter, the guy who just got released from Atlanta a couple days ago, Austin Blythe, names like that, who, their average annual value on their contract is paying them anywhere from $3 to $8 million. Getting guys like that into the fold, I think, is critical. But again, you have to figure out what you're doing with Ezra Cleveland first. Do you want to keep him at right guard? Or do you think that, okay, we solve a bigger problem by finding our left tackle. Now we have to go into the interior, sign a guard that would prevent you potentially for reaching for one in the draft in one of the early rounds.
So, Courtney, it sounds like, according, I think it was to Mike Garofalo, that 6 teams are in on the Orlando Brown Jr. sweepstakes. He's been allowed to pursue a trade, so calls can go. Obviously, they have to go through Baltimore, but they also can go to him. Here's my quick thought on Zimmer and Spielman's future as far as the offensive line is concerned now. The Orlando Brown Jr. trade makes sense to me because he was in the same draft class as O'Neill was, which means that both are going into the last year of their rookie contracts in 2021, which are reasonable cap hits, right? signed, long-term, they would cost you, but that would give you bookends, and short-term, not bad cap hits. You could then go pursue a left guard who's going to get a decent cap hit in 21. My point is very simply, this is their last chance to give Cousins an offensive line where there's no excuses for Kirk, and you say, these guys can pass protect, now Kirk, go do it. Your thoughts on a scenario I think that probably the head coach wouldn't love, but I think if these guys want to save their jobs, they have to bust their butts to give Cousins as perfect a pocket as possible, just to sort of remove the always, but Kirk didn't have this or that.
Yeah, and let's remember, Orlando Brown is not a free agent. Like, he's going into the 4th year of his rookie deal. Right. You'd have to trade somebody for him. Is that Anthony Barr? Because you'd be able to create a bunch of cap space by doing that, but I can guarantee you Mike Zimmer would not be thrilled about packaging up his favorite guy ever and putting him on another team. I think it's smart to pursue an Orlando Brown. I actually had a text come through yesterday from somebody asking me about it, just kind of in a general sense. And I thought to myself, okay, well, this is the time to go find a guard. Absolutely. Because if you really want Rashawn Slater, if you want Elijah Vera Tucker, they'll be there probably at 14 in the first round. And they have, flexibility, and obviously Brown has flexibility too about where he can play. He played, I think, 15 games at left tackle this year and then 3 at right. I mean, you can move him wherever you need to move him. But what's the bigger concern for you? Obviously, you don't have a left tackle. That's huge. But your interior pass protection was really bad last year. And so how do you fix that? It's not like they've learned the last couple of years that it's not going to be the second or third wave of free agency and getting these bottom of the barrel guards who are barely, on their own team's roster. They were probably at risk of getting cut in training camp. So going after, using that money and using what you have to go after somebody who's a significant upgrade, I think should be the priority. But if you can land an Orlando Brown in a trade, and you can also make yourself financially more flexible, malleable rather, going into free agency so that you could do something else, maybe you address tackle and guard all at once. Because, Anthony Barr, that's the next thing they've got to make a decision on, because 7.1 of his base for this year, which is 12.3, becomes guaranteed on the 3rd day of the league year in 2021, which is March 19th. If they cut him outright, if he will not take a restructure, because you'd like to think that when they did this, when he reneged on his deal with the Jets a few years ago, and then he walks it back and they give him this, they overpay him, give him this, this contract. And you saw the cap hits of what they were beyond 2020 for 2021, 22, and 23. You knew that this day was coming, that they were probably going to want to approach him with some semblance of a restructure. Now, I believe he does have an automatic conversion clause, so you could go ahead and convert that base salary to a signing bonus and keep kicking the can down the line. He also has to agree to do that, though. So, I mean, they're in a tough spot there, because if you release him at $7.7 million in cap savings, but it's 7.8 in dead money, and you're already 10 mil plus in dead money for 2021, do you really want to keep adding to that? Because I don't think that's a good look for ownership, especially if you're Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer going into the season with some more scrutiny, on your name, just coming off a 7-9 season and having to get this right. That I think is what makes it very, very challenging.
And that's the thing. Like, we can sit here and it's great. In 2021, we all have access to overthecap.com, and we can sit there and they've got a tool where you can just cut players and save salary cap, and it's great. And it's what the front offices do. But every time you cut a Riley Reif or an Anthony Barr and you save 11 and you save 7, you now need a left tackle, and then you would need another linebacker, and Eric Wilson's a free agent. And so, it's really easy to sit there and say, oh, just you cut Anthony Barr, you save some money. You cut you can make a cut over here and you save some money, but you're opening up more holes on your roster every time you do that. And so
absolutely.
That's what you have to caution against. On the subject of saving money, how do you think Kirk Cousins, and I'll preface by saying, we know that historically teams that win the Super Bowl every single year, including Tom Brady last year, the quarterback cap hit is under 13%. That there hasn't been a quarterback with a cap hit of over 13% win a Super Bowl. And Kirk Cousins' cap hit is right around 17% this year. And I don't think he's going to play on a $45 million cap hit in 2022, however that shakes out, but that would be over 20%. Yeah. How do you think Kirk Cousins' contract plays into the next, let's say, 10 to 14 days? What do you think is most likely to happen there, Courtney?
I don't think they will. I don't think he'll agree to a restructure. And that's going off of history. He never has. I mean, he got the tag twice, never worked out a long-term deal. It took for him to come here a fully guaranteed $84 million. And then obviously they extended him last year because they needed cap relief. I don't think ownership will sign off on another Kirk Cousins extension just yet. And they probably shouldn't, because you did it last year, a year ahead of time, where you really didn't need to. And I mean, this, anybody can play the hindsight game and say that that was the wrong move, but at the time they needed to do it. I see you can kind of understand it, but I honestly think that they're in a situation that you kind of let it ride with Cousins. You do what you need to do. If he has that $45 million cap hit next year, you try to deal with it then. Like, maybe he plays really well this year and you do want to keep him around, but nonetheless, that's next year's problem. They're trying to worry about this year and creating the space that they need to this year, which I think more easily comes with, extension pay potentially for Harrison Smith. He's got a $10+ million cap hit for 2021. That would probably be the easiest route to go. Give him a 2-year extension, something like that. There's, Anthony Barr, obviously I'm going to keep bringing that up until something happens.
Yeah.
But I truly don't believe in my gut that Kirk Cousins and an extension or a restructure by any stretch is on the table. And there are people who will say, well, he's selfish. The best quarterbacks want the best players around him. I'm just going off of what history has shown us. He has never taken a reduced pay. Like, he has never, with the tag in Washington being tagged twice, he didn't work out long-term deals. I think when next year comes around, whether this coaching staff and this front office are together or not, it becomes either their issue next year or it's the next front office and next coaching staff's issue with the $45 million cap hit. And I think if you're ownership, you're eating that regardless, which is why a month from now in April, it's pertinent for them to draft a quarterback. Like, they have to. They cannot get, and I'm not talking about 6th, 7th round Nate Stanleys. Like, you have to do it in the first 2 days without, like, to me, that is, whatever they do in free agency, whether it's a guard, offensive lineman, defensive end, 3 technique, whatever, because the 3 technique class is terrible for the draft this year. You do the opposite of that in April, but you also prioritize getting a quarterback first and foremost.
This is so juicy. So this team has, as far as I can tell, Courtney, a lot of people pulling in different directions for what they think is right and what they think is the right philosophy to try and win football games. Mm-hmm. So I will ask you this one, because I think if it was up to Rick Spielman and company, Anthony Barr would not be released, but he would be traded. Mm-hmm. My guess is that there is one older guy who works in TCO who is probably trying to lay in the train tracks of said trade. But do you think, with how this is going down, that Anthony Barr does get traded, especially if the Vikings can get a third or perhaps, and this is a reach, but if they can replace that 2nd round pick that went to Jacksonville in the Ngakoue trade? Because I'm with you. I think the Barr thing's incredibly fluid, and I think in one way, shape, or form, it's being addressed right now, and we're going to know by Monday, for instance, how it's sort of took out.
Yeah, because they have to make a decision soon. Like, they can't. He's got the 3rd highest cap hit on the team. It's north of $15 million. It's just too expensive for an off-ball linebacker, if I'm being completely frank about it. Like, he doesn't rush the passer as much as he probably should, and how much you're paying him for. So unless you're going to just change his role, and let's not forget, this guy's coming off of a torn pectoral muscle that he sat out the rest of the season for. I've wondered for months, what is the trade market for Anthony Barr coming off of that injury? We'll find out soon, because as much as Mike Zimmer loves this guy, it was his first rounder, first pick ever when he was with the Viking, when he got to the Vikings in 2014. You might have to let him go if it is for the betterment of this team. And really, if it can fix your cap situation, so then you could go after more pass rushers and all the shiny toys that you want on defense. Because, I wrote this earlier this week. Sure, defense is the priority for this team to rebuild. Continue to retool the rebuilding process, because it's a 2 to 3 year process. But in order to do that, you had to answer two questions on the offensive side of the ball. One was Kyle Rudolph and releasing him. That was a quick answer. And then Riley Reif. It took a little longer, and then you released him. So you had to do that in order to fix your defense, to get the, availability, to financial availability to fix your defense. But now, even by way of trading Anthony Barr, if you could recoup a second-round pick, because you're right, Judd, they certainly don't have one. And how funny would it be if they end up getting that second-round pick back from Baltimore? I mean, third time's a charm, right? For trades, maybe this one will work out, considering the first one was Kari Vedvik 2 years ago. And then this last one was Unique Ngakoue after 6 weeks, and realizing that was a disaster. Maybe the third time around will work for them in this trade with Baltimore. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
I think maybe Baltimore, you might just want to take them off your call list if you're the Vikings at this point. Like there's certain teams that just fleece you every time. By the way, this episode of Purple Daily powered in part by our friends at Wamatech. So if you're listening or watching on a broken down phone, tablet, or laptop, if you're an angry coach who throws his film tablet on the sidelines and now you need something new, well, here's what Wamatech does. They're a trusted supplier of pre-owned cell phones, tablets, and laptops. They're a local company based in Minnesota. They source pre-owned devices directly and pass the savings on to you guys. So they'll even buy your old device for cash. Buy, sell, trade in, whatever you guys need. Wamatech's got you covered at wamatech.com. That's WAMATEK.com. So I think the biggest question here, Courtney, and you sort of alluded to already, that Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman, we don't even know for sure if those are the two guys who are going to be in charge 1 year from now, and Kirk Cousins' contract might be somebody else's problem. So with that being said, the window to win a Super Bowl is still open for them in their minds right now. Like, we might sit here and say there's really no way to go from 7-9 or whatever to being a Super Bowl contender, but presumably they are planning to try and win a Super Bowl in the short term. Mm-hmm. And I think my question to you is, with whatever cap space they wind up having and whatever draft assets they have come April, and Danielle Hunter coming back and Michael Pierce coming back, do you see a realistic set of moves to be made to put them into like the NFC Championship game this upcoming season, or is that way too much of a pipe dream?
The realistic side of my brain thinks that that's probably, I still think that, and I know people didn't like that I said this back in like November, December, when you get rid of all the players that they got rid of last year on defense, Mike Zimmer said he miscalculated it. Like, that put them behind the 8 ball. And sometimes that just happens. That's attrition. It happens in sports. Like, you get guys who are on the other side of 30 who have been around with, like, since the time that you got there. Of course, you're going to have to move on and start over. But it's not a 1-year process. Like, that to me is a 2 to 3 year rebuild and retooling of your defensive line, of your secondary, what have you. I think that how would you make that work? Because right now you need to fix the offensive line, right? You need a number 3 receiver. Let's not forget that if you are going to use him. Like, that's the only thing that, like, when I see these arguments going around on social media about how the Vikings could potentially use, another receiver off of the second wave of free agency, would they actually use him? Would they throw out more 11 personnel? Do they want, how would they make that work when they're such a run heavy team? But nonetheless, then you have to think about the defensive side of the ball and all the pieces that you don't have. We talk about edge rushers being a priority, and they certainly are. And it's good that they got someone like Stephen Weatherly, a discount for them, discounted pass rusher. Maybe you can get a couple more of those. But let's not forget about the interior of the defensive line. It's bad. Obviously, Shamar Stephen is not, was a better nose tackle probably than the 3 technique, but you hope that Michael Pierce comes back in shape and ready to go and all of that. Next to him at 3 technique, you need to find something there, because that's been an issue. And I know that, people get irritated with me talking about this, but I'll harp on it until they actually fix it, because they have not had any interior push to keep quarterbacks high in the pocket so your guys on the outside can actually do their job since they had Shelton Richardson 3 years ago. So fix that. But also, your cornerback situation, in your safety situation, you haven't addressed safety since this, before the 6th round in a couple of years. To me, Phil, there's so many pieces that are still needing to, they're not a piece away from winning the Super Bowl. it was interesting watching Dak's press conference the other day when he was talking about, bringing a Super Bowl to Dallas and, all of the rhetoric around winning a trophy that he talked about. You never heard the Vikings talk about that after the signing of Kirk Cousins. Like, they kind of like couched that perfectly. So they didn't ever like guarantee something that they couldn't deliver on. I don't know if this group is talented enough if you upgrade parts of the defense for sure and the offensive line, this group is talented enough to go to the postseason. But when you think about the powers in the NFC, when you think about Green Bay and where they're at and where Tampa is, and, obviously New Orleans is probably going to fall off this year and kind of come back down. But like, what about Dallas? What about all these other teams that you see around the NFL? The Rams, like, how is that going to work to where you could be in the top 5? I mean, maybe top 10, sure. But I just don't know if I believe that they're going to be able to do enough to win a Super Bowl coming off of this, off season.
And amidst all of that, the one name that we have not brought up yet, Danielle Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
What are you hearing there, and how do you think that plays out? Because that definitely holds potentially another huge key of how quickly this defense can come back or be put into disarray if he's not paid.
Sure.
And hold it.
Well, personally, I don't think he has any ground to stand on. Remember when that report broke the day that he was moved, or he was already on IR, the day that he had the neck surgery last year, and it ended his season completely. Yep. Like, there was one outlet, NFL Network, that reported the deal, or like he wants to be the highest paid defensive end or trade him. There's one outlet that reported that. It wasn't this widespread thing. And Rick Spielman told us that had never been communicated to him. I personally don't think Hunter has any leverage now. If he would have played last year, sure, let's talk about it. But like, he doesn't have any leverage right now. He's coming off of a neck injury. Let's see if you can play like the same way you did when you were the fastest to get 50 sacks 2 years ago before we start talking money. Like, eventually they're going to like give him an extension, assuming he comes back and he's the same player, dominant force off the edge. But, in that same vein, like what Rick Spielman said about having him, Hunter, and Pierce back being like 2 free agents, he's right. But what level are you going to get out of them? Like, from everything I've heard, the coaching staff has been in touch with Hunter a little bit. It's not like a constant dialogue back and forth, but, there's also, the belief from everybody I've spoken with that he will be back, this season. There's no question of like, physically, if he's, if the rehab didn't go well or anything like that, but could he potentially be good trade leverage for them? That's the next thing I think that you worry about when you're talking, or you start thinking about when you're talking about free agency. What could you command for a Danielle Hunter? Now, we know how Mike Zimmer feels about Anthony Barr. I don't know if he'd be willing to give up Danielle Hunter. But if somebody called for Hunter coming off a neck injury, I mean, like the thought of trading for players when they come off like being like seriously injured, I'll never truly understand it, because I just feel like you hedge way too much, and I'm not that big of a gambler when it comes to things like that. But that would be something. They could probably command a pretty penny for him. And if he's on, maybe he goes somewhere else and he can actually like earn that contract a year ahead of when Minnesota could potentially give it to him in the future.
See, this is the most interesting part about this tightrope. I've told Judd this and Declan on the show, and that I think it's easy for us to sit here and say that success needs to be linear when it comes to judging coaches and GMs, and that, well, you need to go from below 500 and you need to get to 10-6 and make the playoffs to save your job. Like there needs to be linear progression to save your job. And if I'm the ownership group right now, and this franchise has been around for 60 years, no Super Bowls, and Super Bowl is the thing that we should all be striving for internally here if I'm running the Vikings, right? I would tell Mike and Rick, listen, obviously we'd like to go to the playoffs next year. That would be ideal. We'd like to get fans back in the seats and get excited and win as many games as possible. But I'm not going to judge you on winning 2 extra games and sneaking in. I'm going to judge you based on you presenting me, ownership, with a plan to win a Super Bowl. And if that plan includes having to trade a couple of win now pieces, like, you know what, Danielle Hunter, someone's offering 2 first-round picks. We just have to make this trade. And if we make this trade, right. And if we make that trade, there's no way that we can win the Super Bowl in 2021. But we're going to set up this plan to win it in 2 or 3 years from now. I think the Vikings are so paralyzed by the fear of like dropping off to a 4-12 franchise. They just like they just crave being relevant and getting into the playoffs. Sometimes at the detriment of actually going through with a plan that could win them the Super Bowl, which is why Kirk Cousins is still under contract for like top 5 quarterback salary cap money this year. So your thoughts on that? Like, what is the bar for them to keep their jobs, and what should it be in your mind?
Well, you bring up a good point, because it's like if they go to ownership and they present it as, hey, we can do all these things. And if ownership's like more involved, because you got to think that they've, in a way, have to be, maybe kicking themselves last year and all the extensions that they doled out maybe a little too early for general manager, head coach, quarterback, things like that. That they might want to be like, okay, like we're not just going to open the pocketbook this year until you come up with a plan that's, makes sense. Like, but do they have a general consensus? That's not it. I'm not convinced that they do, with the direction that this team has to go. It's what makes this free agency so interesting for the Vikings, because it's like, is it offense or is it defense? I mean, like, to me, it's defense. That's your priority. But like, do you have to get to defense by way of offense by fixing the offensive line first, and then defense is your priority in the draft? I don't know. We'll find that out soon. But, if they were able to pull off some like bold moves like that, like if they traded Kirk Cousins, like I know this was a conversation from a month ago, but like there was a reason that was out there, because that is so franchise altering, and knowing that you would be taking potentially a step back at the quarterback position, but you would be done. You'd be done with it. You'd be done with the financial restraints that his contract has put on your salary cap. You'd be able to start over. To me, you present that to ownership and you're like, hey, we did it. He's gone. Like, we're not going to be great this year, but give us a chance. But that's also like, I could see it go two ways. You could either have ownership be like, great, we tried, but like, we're proud of you for doing that. Or they could be like, you just admitted failure, that we just spent $84 million plus for a mistake. Like, this was supposed to be the franchise guy. And truth be told, for Rick Spielman, like the quarterback position has been one that he has always tried to get right, but has struggled with, even dating back to his days in Miami. So, I think it could go a number of different ways, but for them to keep their jobs, they have to make the postseason next year. Under Mike Zimmer, they have not had seasons in back-to-back years where they have not made the postseason. To me, that's the first bar right there. Make the playoffs. I don't know if you have to win a game or not, but you have to make the playoffs, because perception with this ownership group and everything is, like you said, relevance. They want to be talked about. They want to be sitting at the cool kids table. Do they have a plan to be the most popular kid? The kid who wins the Super Bowl? I don't know, but they want to be in the mix. They want to be, a team that's always being talked about league wide. Like, I don't know if they have the capability, especially with this group, to win a Super Bowl, but they do have the capability to be relevant.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. Courtney, get some rest if you can, unless an Anthony Barr trade happens in the next 2 hours, because I don't think you're going to sleep next weweek.
Yeah, next week should be really fun. I'm really looking forward to it. And it's nice this year that we actually know, everything's moving forward. We have a season in the fall. There are probably going to be fans everywhere. Like, it's a lot different than free agency was last year. And the fact that there still could be so much quarterback movement makes it exciting.
Yeah. Love it. Amen. That's our friend Courtney Cronin from ESPN.com. You can follow her great Vikings work at ESPN.com. I think you can just go to ESPN.com/NFL and then click on the Vikings link there. And you can follow her on Twitter too. So we'll catch up with you again soon, and we'll see what this thing looks like in a week or two from now. And that's a wrap on this episode of Purple Daily. Be sure to click the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, download the app, and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple if you could. It helps spread the word about the show. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time on Purple Daily.